Welcome everyone. Today, welcome to the webinar. Our webinar is about the essentials of certification for GOTS and Textile Exchange programs. Before moving into the webinar, I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Derviş Ozan. I'm working as technical and quality specialist in USB certification. It's almost 4 years. So about this webinar, the presentation slides will be shared with all participants. There will be no Q&A section at the end of the webinar, but you can share your questions from the Q&A chat box during the presentation. All answers will be shared with the presentation slides after the webinar. Also, you can contact with our site always from the below email address with us. About today's agenda, we will talk about the definitions to better understand the meanings of the words and the GOTS and Textile Exchange programs. What are they and what is the aim of them actually? Then we will talk about standards, claims, and requirements for the standards under GOTS and Textile Exchange programs, and the regulatory connections with the standards between the regulations. Also, after that, we will talk about the certification process, how it starts, how it ends, and how it goes from all over the supply chain. After that, we will discuss the scope certificates, scope certificate authentications, and we will small talk about the transaction certificates also. Later that, we will share the details of our company USB certification, and we will give the updates, news from the industry. Before moving into definitions, also you can check the GOTS and Textile Exchange documents to better understand the requirements, claims that mentioned procedures actually. For GOTS in general, there are 3 documents, which is GOTS version 7, manual for the implementation of GOTS, and due diligence handbook for certified entities. But for Textile Exchange, they shared different documents for each of the standards and certification procedure document, and also the accreditation certification procedures. You can find these documents from the Textile Exchange Knowledge Center by going below the connection link for Textile Exchange, and also going to the GOTS Download Center. You can upload the related documents from these parts always. So about definitions and programs. So we will talk about first the program. What does the program mean? After that, we will talk about standard, certification body, and accreditation body. So in general, the program is the system that manages the implementation and verification of the standards established for the dissemination and development sustainability studies. And when we are talking about standards which are issued by the programs actually, the standards means a set of rules developed by the program that define how particular product, service, or process should be in order to achieve the program's own objectives. So if we are talking about certification bodies are the independent organizations that audits and certifies for the conformity of a product, service, or process to a specific standard. For accreditation bodies, these are also independent authorities that verifies that a certification body is a competent, impartial, and reliable according to the specific standard. So programs are issuing standards, certification bodies audits and certifies to give standards to the organizations, and the accreditation bodies are auditing certification bodies to verify that certification bodies comply with the standard rules. So our first program is GOTS, which is Global Organic Textile Standard. This program is an international sustainability standard which promotes the use of organic fibers generally in the textile products while evaluating environmental, social, and chemical criteria together. Uh, this standard managed by the Global Standard, which is a non-profit organization based in Germany. So in general, GOTS mandates environmentally friendly and ethical practices throughout the entire, all over the supply chain, from production to labeling, thereby offering a production model that respects both nature and workers' rights. So in general, GOTS has more than 15,000 certified organizations in all over the world, and they are operating their operations in 87 countries in all over the world. When we are checking those countries, it's the most of the certifications completed under India and Euro, as we can see in the left chart. The 26 percentages of the certified entities are located in the India and Europe. So also more than 4,000 certifications completed in India, and after that it comes from with China and Turkey. So about Textile Exchange, this is a US-based international non-profit organization that promotes sustainability in the global fashion and textile industry. And their aim is to drive transformation in this field. It promotes sustainability by reducing environmental footprint of the fashion and textile sector and encouraging the use of recycled and organic raw materials. Their aim also to establish a climate target strategy, which called Climate Plus. This Climate Plus targets the 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from fiber and raw material production by 2030. It creates various sustainability standards towards these goals and conducts audits throughout independent certification bodies, which we mentioned in the definition slides. And about Textile Exchange, more than 93,000 certified organizations audited and certified in 2024, and they are operating their operations under 115 countries in all over the world. So these countries are also marked in the right world map. All marked countries are the operations that completed under Textile Exchange standards, and their annual growth between 2023 to 2024 is 24%, which is a high percentage. These data for GOTS and Textile Exchange are from the annual reports of the programs. So about standards, claims, requirements, and regulations. Before talking about the standards, claims, and requirements, we have to understand the product traceability. What is the traceability and how it can be, the traceability is completed, how we can ensure that traceability can be completed. So traceability is basically to track the product from all over the supply chain with the certifying the organizations and giving transaction certificates to products when they are moving into facility to another facility. So to track the supply chain, it comes from the input from the producers, the raw material producers, the starting from the supply chain. For recycling supply chain, it comes from the waste collectors. For the recycling the products come from waste collectors, and for the organic part and the down part or the animal part, it comes from the organic certified farms and also certified farms for the animal standards. So every scope certificate, the organizations in the supply chain, every organization has to be certified, and products for each shipments, there should be a transaction certificates to track the products between the organizations. About standards, under Textile Exchange, there are 7 standards but all of the standards are mainly under the CCS requirements, and for global standard program company, there is a GOTS standard. So we will talk about the differences and the requirements of these standards. When we are discussing the content claim standard, which called CCS, CCS is a chain of custody system for all textile exchange standards. It forms the basis for all textile exchange standards. So to understand what is the chain of custody, we have to check the principles of that chain of custody. So under chain of custody, there are some document management requirements and record keeping requirements. So about record keeping, trainings, procedures, all the agreements and all other documents has to be kept in the company, and they all has to be prepared by the company. About product and content ratio definitions, actually the product definitions means what is the product, like it can be a t-shirt, it can be a sweatshirt or pants. And about the content ratio, what is the non-certified and what is the certified ratios in the products. Those ratios has to be defined for tracking the product in all over the supply chain. And also we have to discuss about the product segregations to separate the certified products and non-certified products to prevent any contaminations all over the supply chain. And about volume reconciliation exercises, it's generally about balancing inputs, outputs, and the loss factors. They all has to be in balance. So in general, inputs and loss factors should be equal to outputs. Actually, outputs and loss factors should be equal to inputs. Also, the content claim standard cannot be certified on its own, but it's the main basis for all textile exchange standards. About globally recycled standard, which called GRS, the same traceability exercises we talked about has to be completed. Under traceability exercises, monitoring and volume reconciliation of recycled material along all over the supply chain has to be ensured. Also, there are some social requirements under GRS, which is the difference between other textile exchange standards. Under GRS, we have to ensure the employee rights, occupational health and safety requirements, and working conditions. We have to check those parameters under the social responsibility, social requirements. About environmental responsibility, we have to complete controls about wastewater management, greenhouse gas emissions, training, and procedures for the environmental responsibility. And for chemical restrictions, the companies has to complete a chemical inventory to share with the certification bodies, and those chemicals mentioned in the inventory has to be controlled with the safety data sheets that shared by the companies. About labeling of GRS, GRS claim must contain at least 20% of recycled material, but for GRS label, this percentage must be at least 50%. About recycle claim standard, which is RCS, it's generally similar with the GRS claim, but the requirements are less than GRS. Under RCS, as GRS, same traceability exercises has to be completed, but for labeling the RCS, at least 5% of recycled content uh, produced by the produced to product. For labeling the RCS, if the product has recycled content between 5 to 95%, RCS blended label can be given to the product. But if the percentage is higher than 95%, RCS 100 label can be given. But under RCS, there is no chemical restrictions, social requirements, or environmental requirements. So OCS, which called Organic Content Standard, it's a bit different than GRS and RCS. The main objective of OCS monitoring and volume reconciliation of organically grown products. So it's about organic fibers actually. We have to ensure the traceability of organic materials in all over the supply chain. And these organic materials has to come from organic certified farms into the supply chain. About labeling, it's kind of similar with the RCS, but the names are different. The similarity is also the minimum 5%, at least 5% organic content should be in the product. Between 5% to 95% organic in material, the OCS blended label can be given to the product. For OCS 100 label, more than 95% organic material has to be in the product. About responsible animal fiber standards, these standards about animals, as we can understand from its name. Responsible standards encompass the harvesting of raw material from animal fibers with due regard animal, land, and social welfare. And what is the standards that under the responsible animal fiber standards? They are responsible wool standards, which is for sheeps, responsible sheeps, responsible mohair standard, which for the animals of called mohairs, and about responsible alpaca standards and also responsible down standards. So same traceability exercises has to be ensured for all of the animal standards, monitoring and volume reconciliation of responsible fibers throughout the supply chain. And the requirement for labeling these standards are kind of same as RCS and OCS. At least 5% responsible animal fiber contact has to be included in the product to label the product with the animal standards. So about Global Organic Textile Standard, which is GOTS, the same organic content, same organic fiber like OCS, but it's a different program. And for that reason, the requirements are different between OCS and GOTS. GOTS has same traceability exercises, but in textile exchange, it is under CCS, Content Claim Standard. But since the GOTS is different program, it's not under CCS. GOTS has its own chain of custody system actually. So, but the requirements are the same. Traceability under GOTS, monitoring and volume reconciliation of organic material along all over the supply chain. The main difference of the GOTS, not just the main, but there has to be due diligence requirements under GOTS standard. What is the due diligence? Due diligence is identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for negative impacts in the supply chain generally. About social requirements, employee rights, occupational health and safety requirements, and working conditions has to be checked under GOTS social requirements. About environmental responsibility, we have to ensure that ensure the requirements for wastewater management, sound and air pollutions, COD calculations, and greenhouse gas emissions. About chemical restrictions, it's a bit different between GRS. Under GRS, we were checking the restricted products, actually, the hazardous amounts, but under GOTS, GOTS are clearly giving us the GOTS approved chemicals directly. So if the shared chemicals are not under the GOTS approval, we can't use these chemicals under GOTS program, GOTS standard. About labeling GOTS, products with at least 70% organic content can be certified under GOTS. The labels, there are two labels which called made with organic and organic labels. For made with organic label, the products has to at least 70% organic content to 95%. And for organic label, the products has to produced by at least 95% of organic material. So to compare all of these standards, we can check this table actually. So in general, GOTS materials come from the organic farm standards. It's like similar with the OCS standard. And GRS and RCS is kind of similar. The input of these standards are the recycled inputs, and RDS, RAS, RAS, RMS, and RWS standards are about animal welfare. The inputs are about animal welfare. And also under responsible animal standards, land management and social requirements about the input validation requirements has to be ensured. As I mentioned previously, GOTS has own supply chain requirements. It's kind of similar with CCS, but under Textile Exchange, the supply chain requirements comes from the CCS, Content Claim Standard. And processing requirements, GOTS and GRS is kind of similar. Under these standards, social, environmental, and chemical requirements has to be ensured. And all of these standards labeling is for material content claim generally. So if we are going to check the standard requirements, connections between the regulations, we can say that it's initially about like EU Green Deal and textile in the textile strategy. These are kind of a political, environmentally sustainability political packages. Under these packages, there is a directive which called CSDDD, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. For this directive, the proof of responsible sourcing and label rights due diligence has to be ensured. And under GOTS and GRS standards provide documented chain of custody, traceability, and social requirements. Compliance inputs are compliant with this requirement. And again, under EU Green Deal and Textile Strategy, Eco-Design for Sustainability Products Regulation, the requirement of this regulation is demands durability, recyclability, and recycled content disclosure. And the compliance with this requirement is comes from GRS and RCS certifications, provide verifiable recycled content data, while GOTS covers toxicity and durability. And about digital product passport, which called DPP, it will be rolling out in 2027. The requirement for digital product passport, product level traceability, which means all over the supply chain, the product will be traceable, material disclosure and carbon footprint requirements should be traceable all over the supply chain. And with GOTS and Textile Exchange, these requirements will be complied. Textile Exchange will be shared materials matter standard to comply with this requirement. And under GOTS version 7 and the further versions of GOTS, this requirement will be complied with DPP actually. About EU Green Claims Directive, which will be expected to issued in 2026, the requirements is substantive sustainability claims, which is complete under GOTS and Textile Exchange programs, and for chemical and safety regulations, which is the requirement is REACH and California Prop 65. The compliance with this requirement is GOTS has the strictest chemistry requirements, which prohibits many substances already on restricted list. Future-proofing brands, Textile Exchange standards integrate restricted substance lists indirectly. So about certification processes, we talked about standards, claims, and requirements. We have to ensure how the certification process completed to comply with the traceability and tracking the product in the all over the supply chain. We talked about the issuing scope certificates and transaction certificates to track down the product. So for issuing the scope certificate and transaction certificates, we have to understand how the certification process starts, how it ends, and what are the processes under this certification process. So mainly, the certification process starts with the applications. So these applications, companies or certification bodies has to check the company related site informations, which are site names, site addresses, and the other details. For example, under Textile Exchange, there will be also Textile Exchange IDs. About legal documents, certification bodies has to check and companies has to share their own legal documents to prove their legal existence. And the standard informations, companies has to clearly mention that which standards they are applying for example, GRS, RCS, and OCS. For product and process informations, companies has to share all the details that they want to certify it under which processes. For example, it can be a manufacturing process, it can be a spinning process or dyeing process. And also product informations has to be shared to compare the processes our products are comply with each other. So companies has to share the details that what are they going to produce after they certified. So these details can be shared, what are the products and what is the ratios of these products. And also companies has to share the details of the number of employees. So each site has, for each site, the employee number should be given to the certification body because it affects directly the offer part, which I will talk about in the next slide. And also companies has to share the previous audit informations, which called under GOTS is migration, and Textile Exchange it's called as transfer. between certification bodies. The companies always share the details of their previous audits, so the certification bodies can check the previous nonconformities and they can check the nonconformity details during the audits. About contract step of the certification process, there is a pricing step and the contract between parties. About pricing step, the pricing comes from the details from the application part that shared by the companies. And after that, when it's completed, it's also a contract has to be signed between both parties, which is certification body and the applicant. About audit preparation, in audit preparation, there has to be the date of audit determination completed. So there has to determine a audit date, and the preparations for the audit should be conducted. And what can be the preparations? The standard related documents can be prepared. All the employees, if it's a requirement under GOTS and GRS, all the employees, responsible employees, should be available during the audit. The companies has to plan this part. And also the chemical inventories can be prepared and other data can be prepared into preparation part. So under audit section, during the audit, certification bodies are completing some requirements and they are controlling the traceability exercises. They are completing document controls, standard trainings, employee interviews, which can be under GOTS and GRS standards. Also, certification bodies can complete a site tour. Also, they have to ensure the volume reconciliation, which is the balance of the inputs and outputs. They have to ensure that the safety checks, migrant worker and child labor controls has to be completed. And also environmental impact controls has to be ensured under GOTS and GRS standards during the audits. So about audits and the findings of the audits. After the audit is completed, the audit report has to share with the company, and this audit report has to detailing any failure to meet the standard from companies. If there is a non-conformity, by the way, this failure, which called is a non-conformity under the programs and standards, if there is a non-conformity specified in the report, corrections must be made by the company within the period specified in the standards. So under these standards, there are three types of non-conformities, which are minor non-conformity, major non-conformity, and critical non-conformity. So what is minor conformity? We can say that a single observed lapse in a produce required as part of the organization's management system. And when we are saying major non-conformity, results in a fundamental or systematic failure to achieve the objectives of the standard. And if we talk about the critical non-conformity, it can be a serious failure to meet the fundamental principles of the standard. So what are the closing timelines of these non-conformities? To close a minor conformity, the organizations has 60 days to close this non-conformity. And when it comes to major non-conformity, this timeline is 30 days. And if there's a critical non-conformity exists, it requires an immediate actions. So what can be the results of this non-conformity? It can be end with a suspension. certification cancellation, or withdrawal. So if there is a active scope certificate, to failing the closing these non-conformities, this active scope certificates has to be suspended. If, for example, it's an initial certification, initial audit, and if the companies are failed to close these non-conformities, the certificate cannot be issued. So the certification process should be cancelled. And after the suspension, if still the non-conformity cannot be closed in 180 days, the scope certificates has to be withdrawn as the result of couldn't closing the non-conformities. To closing these non-conformities, certification bodies can control the documents, the closing evidence documents, and also they can complete an additional audits to the organizations to close, to ensure that those non-conformities are closed. So after closing the non-conformities, certification decisions has to be completed in 60 days from certification bodies to issue a scope certificate. But these certification decisions can be ended as a positive decision or negative decision. So if company is failed to close a non-conformity, the certification decision can be negative. But if the organization comply with all standard requirements, the certification decision will be positive. And all certification decisions has to be made within 60 days from the closing meeting of audit. So to issue a scope certificate, as a result of a positive certification decision, the scope certificates can be issued, will be issued actually. And if we say about transaction certificates, a transaction certificate is issued for every product shipment made by the company to ensure traceability after the scope certificate is issued by certification body. So when it's come from the certificates and the validations, we talked about scope certificates and transaction certificates. About scope certificates, which called SC, a scope certificate is an official document certifying that the products produced or traded by a company in a certain time period comply with the Textile Exchange or GOTS standards. So mainly, as we said, positive certification decision has to be given. As we also said, the decision has to complete it under 60 days. Also, after the decision, also in 60 days from the closing meeting of audit, if it's an initial audit, the certificate has to be issued within 60 days. But if there is a recertification case and if there is an active scope certificate, this period may be extended to up to 90 days if an active scope certificate is available. So the validity dates of these scope certificates, the validity period of issued scope certificates can be maximum 1 year from the issue date. In case of force measures, these periods may be extended within the time frames specified in the standards upon examination requests. So if there is a change request, if there is an issue that affects the scope certificates, these change requests must be shared with the certified organizations. So during the validity period, if there is a change in the information contained in the scope certificate, additionally, audits may be carried out or change may be directly reflected to the scope certificates. Open requests come from organizations. About data transmission of scope certificates. So the data from issued scope certificates is sent to the tracked system for Textile Exchange, while for GOTS it is manually entered into GOTS database for now. GOTS is developing a GTP system for this purpose. So about scope certificates, let's check the parts of an example template of the scope certificates. In scope certificates, it contains the certification body informations in the left above part of the scope certificate. Under certification body informations, the name, address, under Textile Exchange, TE ID informations will be the certificate about certification body informations. The certification body's name and the details of the certification body will be mentioned in the scope certificates. About company informations, as I just said, the company name, address, if it's Textile Exchange standard, the TE ID of the company has to be mentioned in the scope certificates. About standard, scope, and validity informations, the certified standards has to be mentioned in the scope certificates. Also, about scope informations like processes and products has to be mentioned in the first page of the scope certificates. And also, issue dates and validity dates are mentioned in the scope certificates. So about product informations that we talked about in the previous slides, the product details, product categories, which is it can be a t-shirts, sweatshirts, or woman clothing, man clothing. It can be a general details, and also the ratios of the certified material, certified content, and non-certified content should be mentioned. Will be mentioned in the scope certificates. Also, under the main facility, main site, which is the certified organization, is mentioned in the first page of the scope certificate. If there are any sites audited and certified with the main site mentioned in the first page, those sites are also mentioning in the last page of the scope certificates under site appendix, associated subcontractor appendix, and independently certified subcontractor appendix in the last page of the scope certificates. So to verify these scope certificates, there are two databases, which is global. The first database, it's GOTS database, which we mentioned the link down below. And also for Textile Exchange, to find a certified company, you can directly go to the below link and verify authenticate these scope certificates. These databases are public databases, so everyone can clearly go to those databases and verify the scope certificates. So if we will talk about transaction certificates, we have to understand that what is a transaction certificate. A transaction certificate is a document that shows that a product has been sent by a certified supplier to a certified buyer, and that these products comply with relevant Textile Exchange or GOTS standard. It is issued separately for each shipment to ensure traceability in all over the supply chain. So how a transaction certificate can be issued? It starts with the application of transaction certificates and the reviewing the application details. After that, document management should be completed. So we can say about sharing the documents that related to the application of transaction certificate. It can be invoices, shipment documents, or packing lists. Also, about publication periods, the transaction certificates has to be issued in 14 days if a valid and completed transaction certificate applications shared with the certification bodies. And about change requests, if there is a different information received by organizations or any other parts, transaction certificates can be revised in 14 days. And also about data transmission, the transaction certificate data are shared to Textile Exchange that database with duty record system also. So about USB certification and the news. So USB certification, we talked about all the standards, programs, and requirements. For these programs, not just GOTS and Textile Exchange programs actually, USB certifications are making their operations under textile and recycling, under analyzing and testing, also the industrial certification and management system operations, also brand and supply consideration audits, also academia of USB, and second part audits with also the farm and food certification operations can be done under USB certification. So in general, USB certifications making their operations more than 80 countries with more than 7,500 system operators, and USB certifications is issuing more than 6,500 scope certificates per year, and also more than 90,000 transaction certificates more per year. So USB certifications, which is accredited under AOS, and USB certification is also operating GOTS, Textile Exchange, Better Cotton, SFA, and Regenerate programs. All the standards that we mentioned in the previous slides can be operated and certified under USB certifications. Also, USB certification is conducting audits and certified can be give certificates under Regenerate, SFA, and Better Cotton programs also. So you can directly apply from the below link to certify under these standards. So what are the updates? Standard updates is for GOTS. There will be a GOTS version 8 which will be effective on 2027 March. And also GOTS has announced a new standard, that GRTS, Globally Responsible Textile Standard. And for Textile Exchange, they announced Materials Matter Standard, which will be effective in the next years. So about transaction certificates, Textile Exchange will revise their documents about transaction certificates. So to understand what are the updates and how the company's organizations will comply with these changes, you can directly come to our next TC webinar, which called Important Changes in GOTS and Textile Exchange TC Policies. Also, for these updates and further questions, you can always contact with the mentioned email address. You can always follow the news and updates from our LinkedIn page, also from the USB website, and also the newsletter from Textile Exchange and Recycling newsletter. Also, USB certification will attend the Textile Exchange conference, which will be completed between 13 and 17 October in Portugal. So we are looking forward to meet with you in the Textile Exchange 2025 conference. So also we have a QR code that we will request your feedbacks about this webinar. We will be happy to get feedbacks and your comments for this webinar, and the details that mentioned in this webinar. You can scan the QR code that we are sharing right now, and you can directly write your comments about this webinar. We will share all your questions that mentioned in the Q&A chat box with the presentation slides after this webinar. So thank you for listening to us. As we mentioned, we are looking forward to meet with you in the Textile Exchange conference in the future webinars. Thank you all.